Good afternoon, guys, and welcome back to my weekly watch list. So today we're going to be going through our normal three indicators in terms of the dollar index, gold and oil, and then we'll move on to the currency pairs we're looking at for this week. So of course it's important to remember that it's sort of coming up to the end of the month, so it's the last week of the month, and therefore we need to look at these monthly time frames more than ever to sort of give us an idea of where we could be going into the next month, and it could give us an idea of how price may reverse to get them final closes ready for next week. As well as that, we've just got to make sure to be careful and look at sort of different opportunities within the market, because at the moment there's a lot going on in terms of things like oil. So maybe your trading plan might be a little bit different at the moment, or you might be finding that some of the setups you normally get aren't occurring. So just make sure to be sensible, make sure to have them high probability setups, and if you need to slightly change your trading plans, be a bit safer at the moment, then by all means do so. So as always, we're going to start off with the DXY on the monthly time frame. So here you can see the price obviously still retracing that spinning top. We haven't made any sort of major move to the upside or to the downside. We're just sort of retracing it at the moment, and obviously we are above the monthly 50 EMA. On the weekly, we have sort of faked out that trend line we saw last week. And for this week, we've just had this sort of bullish candlestick. We failed to close above the wick of the spinning top as well, so potentially could see a rollover from there. And we are above the weekly 50 EMA, but currently sitting below that last major high. So then going to the daily, on the daily we can just see we have this trend line here. We have broken above this trend line, but failed to make a new major high. And of course, in order to invalidate the trend, we need to make that new high before retracing and then potentially going further. We are obviously above the daily 50 EMA as well, but as I said, we're sort of sitting in between. At the moment, so we need price to sort of show us its hand before we can make a major decision. On the 4 hour, we can just see prices obviously broke out that trend, as we said, but it's failed to break above that last lower high. So you can just see we're sort of sitting in between at the moment at sort of this level here and this level. So we just want to see whether a breakout to either side, obviously a break at 4 hour 50 EMA in order to show us this next move. And then going to the daily, you can just see we are currently below the hourly 50 EMA. Next we've got is gold. So gold, of course, has been quite interesting this week. So you can see on the monthly we are really pushing high now, but of course we have still got a week to go, so potentially this could push back down. But of course it's going to be interesting to see how we break above these two double spinning tops, and if we break above or maintain this pressure above, or if we come back down and retrace. So going on to the weekly. And of course we are above that month 50 EMA, but of course coming onto the weekly, we can just see here we've got this high that was formed, and our price has sort of retraced that greystone doji that we had last week. We haven't made any sort of significant close above that, so we haven't really invalidated that. So for me, I'm not really seeing this in changing my bias to bullish at the moment. I still think we will see some bearish pressure, and it could be interesting to see where we come from this week. But of course we have sort of come up above this liquidity zone, but as I said, not closed above that greystone doji. Of course, being above the weekly 50 EMA and having that bullish impulse. So now going on to the daily. On the daily, we can just see this trend line that was formed, and obviously we looked at it last week. So prices broke through that, then retraced up to the 78.6, and now just sitting within an area of liquidity. So we have this sort of spinning top doji formed. So suggested indecision. We haven't broken above any major highs, as I said, so looking potentially at rollover from here now that we've broke that trend line and retrace successfully. Could be interesting to see if this now rolls over to the downside and comes close to that daily 50 EMA. Then we go on to the 4 hour. Onto the 4 hour, you can just see we have got this obviously this trend line, we can see it a little bit closer. So you can see this liquidity area sitting up at the top here, and we're just sort of sitting above the 4 hour 50 EMA. In the week, we did try and make a big move below, and then we pushed straight back up, and potentially forming some sort of triple top in this area. So it'll be interesting to see this week if we can continue this downside momentum that we started or ended on Friday. So on Friday, you can see we've got this evening star, and then we've got this retracement here. So obviously with this, we've got that retracement that we'd anticipate after the evening star, and then potentially can look for this to come further down from here. But of course we want to see a break of the 4 hour 50 EMA, break of this level here, and then come down to the downside, breaking through these higher lows on our way. So going on to the 1 hour, we can just see that price is obviously sitting just above that 1 hour 50 EMA, but perfectly sitting on that 78.6 level. Next is oil. So of course, I think for many of us, this is something we've never seen before. Oil went into minus numbers. So we had minus $35 a barrel on, I think it was Monday evening. So really interesting to see that. Something that I'd never imagined would happen. But of course, these things we can't prepare for, but all we can do is plan properly and try and make sure we put these into our trade and consider these, but not let them completely take over what we're doing. So you can see here we've got this trend line. Obviously, that bearish trend line's happened for ages, and now we sort of broke below that sort of wedge, and now we're coming lower. We obviously have now made this massive wick, breaking the previous all-time low. Obviously, I was anticipating $16 a barrel, which we've reached, but we've gone even further than that and gone to minus $35 a barrel, which I don't think anyone would have anticipated that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens now. So, of course, the reason why we had that was because if there was a rollover in contracts between April and May. So now they've got the next contract sort of started, and obviously we then saw this massive wick, which for me is something I've never seen before in terms of going into minus numbers, as I said. But we can only sort of trade what we see and try and work out what the next move is from here. So going on to the weekly. You can just see the massive wick that's formed. So obviously we've now retraced from that sort of big downfall. And of course, TradingView won't show you how negative we did go, but of course we did go sort of minus $35 a barrel, which if I change this, so obviously we've made a massive difference. So if I zoom out, you can see we're looking at all the way down here, which of course is not going to show you on here because for most brokers they suspended trading at that level, so people couldn't get into trades. Some people tried to get in the trade after the markets reopened, but of course price is now retraced back to that level. So it's now just sitting on that current major low that we obviously had within the previous week. And we obviously got this massive wick to the downside. The question is this just a retracement or are we reverse from here? Could this be the start of the reversal to the upside? Going onto our daily, we can just see, of course, being below that 50 MA, we can see perfectly sort of prices retracing and just sitting on that current major low. We've not broken above it. We are just maintaining below it. And of course, on Friday we had this spinning top close, suggesting indecision. So now we could roll over from here and move down to the downside. And of course, it's very interesting because of the way price action obviously closed and opened. But here I'm just looking at what I can see, and here I can see that we're closing below that major low, had a spinning top, so potentially we're going to roll over to the downside. Then we go into the 4 hour. So on the 4 hour, you can just see we have got this trend line. We'll go on to the 1 hour because it's a little bit clearer on there, but you can see we're just currently above that 4 hour 50 MA. On the 1 hour, you can just see this trend line that's formed. We have now broken that, creating a sort of triple top. Sitting on, you can see how close we are on that current major low. So now what we're looking for is prices obviously come down and break through these higher lows in its way before coming down to that all-time low. And of course, for our 90% rule, we want to come to the start of the trend around $6.40 or $6.50 a barrel. So of course, we do also have this gap that needs to, well, ideally be filled, but I'm not too sure how it would work because of course it's something that we've never seen before, or personally I've never seen before, and I'm sure many of you haven't either. So it'd be interesting to see if we do sort of come lower and try and fill this gap in any way. But of course, it is a very strange situation. But of course, we just have to be careful and try and adjust ourselves to the market. So starting off with our currency pairs on the watch list this week. So starting off with Australian dollar CAD on the monthly. So you can see this big spinning top that we had last month. We're now retracing to the top of that candle and testing that major high. So now we're just looking if price can sort of push back down from here, maybe reject this major high. We are around sort of 60 or just under 60 pips away from the major high, so possibly come up to retest that even further before potentially rolling over to the downside. But very impulsive month so far. On the weekly, we can just see this downwards trend line that we've now broken above, but we haven't broken the structure yet because obviously we haven't broken that weekly 50 MA. It looks like we did slightly close above it when we look here, but it's not really a sort of convincing break of that. We're just sort of sitting on it at the moment. Of course, last week we was looking at a case we got that inverted hammer off of the 88%, and it looked quite nice to go to the downside. However, the price has now pushed up to the weekly 50 MA, which we did see on a couple of pairs. I think it was more on the daily, but we saw them sort of push onto that EMA before reversing, so potentially could be seeing a fake out here. We've just got to sort of trade sensibly. We have got this liquidity formed by this wick here. So when we go into the daily, we can just see price has got this obviously this downward trend that we've sort of been in and out at the moment. Okay, so when we're looking on the daily, we can just see that we are pushing above that 88%. But like I said before, we're in that area of liquidity, and we could just be testing these highs. And in order to break that, we need to break that major high and retest it successfully for us to even consider going long on this, because we are still in a bearish structure. Of course, price is quite above this daily 50 MA now, but price seems to be slowing down, decelerating, and it's quite corrective rather than impulsive. So when we go into the 4 hour. On the 4 hour, we can just see this 4 hour counter trend line. So this is obviously going against the trend. So we have this here. We can just see that we've broken through and then retested it here. But now we're starting to make this ascending channel. So what I'll be looking for is, now we've had the fourth touch, potentially we could reverse from here, and then we could see sort of a reversal from here, something like this, and then sort of hover on the bottom of the channel, maybe break it, break the 4-hour 50 EMA once that comes over, and then obviously we've got a lot of room to run to the downside from here. So potentially something like that is what I'm thinking for this week. And then we can obviously see a big rollover, but we need to see sort of a few factors play out before we can get into this trade. However, there's a lot of potential when we look at that daily and weekly time frame. So then when we go on to the next pair, so we're going to go on to the next pair, which is CAD Swiss. So if we go on to the monthly, we can just see, of course, we're looking at all-time low, and this is a pair I've been watching for weeks, and like a few of these pairs, it's just not really happened yet. But we can see on the monthly, we're just sort of still sitting within that liquidity area and pushing back down. So we're not breaking above that, which suggests that we're not potentially going any higher from here. On the weekly, you can see obviously after filling that gap, we have sort of maintained that level below the previous low here, and of course this liquidity, we're now sort of trying to make this even star, which didn't occur this week. We end up having another spinning top, but we're seeing sort of a deceleration here, rather than pushing up from here like we would have thought with all these wicks of downside. We're just stalling at the moment, below the weekly 50 MA, of course, but moving on to the daily, we can see that pattern that we've been looking at for weeks now, that rising wedge. We've obviously broke out of that, made that new low, retested that all-time low, come back up. Now we've had come up for another touch of that, sort of the top of the wedge, and then reverse from here in the 38.2. So you can see we've touched it and then caused a shooting star after the bullish engulfing, but we've now got a shooting star off of it, and just below that daily 50 MA too. So potentially this could now see the roll over to the downside. On the 4-hour, you can see how we've had this high here, then made this low, and then retraced at 78.6, where we've got this really nice reversal to the downside, and then price really impulsive on Friday. And of course, this could be related to the fact that oil has seen sort of them massive decrease in prices, and therefore we're seeing that played out in the Canadian dollar, because of course if the price of oil goes down, then the price of Canadian dollar goes down, due to the fact that Canada have most of their foreign exchange, or sort of most of their income from exports being oil. So naturally, if the price goes down, their exports fall, and then of course it's negative for their economy. So potentially looking for that break of the 4-hour 50 MA, and then we have a big move to the downside to come. And then if we go on the 1 hour, you can just see we've got that bearish engulfing through the 1-hour 50. So we'd look for a retracement and then to the downside. The next pair on our watch list is CAD Yen. So CAD Yen, you can just see we've got this wedge here. We've obviously broken out of that wedge as we saw on CAD Swiss, and then we're just sitting in between these two levels at the moment, this spinning top. So we're interested to see how this closes. On the weekly, we are majorly below the weekly 50 MA. We come up and tested that last major low, then broke back below, and now we're just pushing to the downside. So not sort of the most bearish candles, but it's still bearish potential coming to the downside. On the daily, we can just see this trend line that's been broken. So when we look at this, we can just see we're below that daily 50 MA. We broke the counter trend line and retested it successfully. And when we go into the 4-hour, we can just see, of course, this sort of channel. We've now broke below that with a bearish impulsive candle, bearish engulfing after this inverted hammer. Broke through the 50 MA, and then we're looking for sort of a retracement, which we've got a slight retracement to spinning top. So looking for maybe a higher retracement to the 4-hour 50, and then roll over to the downside, breaking through that previous high low, retesting that, and then coming down to test these other high lows too. So at the moment we're seeing a lot of structures within a bigger structure. So as we go down the time frames, there's a smaller structure in each one. So something just to bear in mind, because when you get in your entries, you can get, say, a 1-hour, 4-hour entry for a big swing trade potentially. So something to consider. So just move that there. So yeah, of course, so now we're just looking for that sort of retracement, and then potentially get in. Obviously it'd be nice to break that previous high line, retrace and retest that as well. And then we go on the 1 hour. Okay guys, so when we go into the 1 hour, which is obviously looking at where we could potentially get an entry off of the retracement. Looks like we've retested that 1-hour 50 after breaking it, and obviously the 23.6% here, so the price just sort of in the middle of the 38.2 and 23.6, but potentially could roll over from here. And then of course you can see there's quite a fair bit of downside potential even on the hourly time frame. So even a day trade, maybe 100 pips or just under 100 pips, potential to the downside. Next one we've got on our watch list is Euro Yen, so something I've been watching for weeks. This one's more of a case of trying to find a sort of scaling rather than the initial entry, but of course it does look very nice even on sort of the higher time frame. So on the monthly, you can see that bearish price action after that retest, after breaking out the wedge, then reversed to 38.2, retraced to 38.2, and now we reversed to the downside. We've equaled the previous low, and now we're looking for that push down to these minus 27%. The next high low, then a minus 61.8% before we have this massive gap down towards the start of the trend, which is our 90% rule. So when we break a trend, it's a 90% chance we're going to break all the way to the start of the trend. So next, on the weekly, we can just see obviously price has then made this sort of next lower high, retest or retrace at 71% and then broke to the downside. We've now broken below this sort of bit of support here that we found, and now we're just looking for price to then retest that, which we have now done, and now we're just looking for price to continue to the downside, fulfilling them fib targets. So when we now go on to the daily, we can just see obviously being below the daily 50 MA, we're just sitting within this area of liquidity now where we've now broken below this sort of low here, and now we're looking for that retest, which we've now got, so this higher low, and then looking to potentially move to the downside. So going on to the 4 hour, we can just see here that we've obviously fulfilled that 90% of this smaller structure. So as I said, we've got a couple of structures here. We've now broke through that, fulfilled that, and now we're starting to retrace to the 50% and the 4 hour 50 MA before moving to the downside. So you can just see here, we could even put a trend line in potentially. Something like this. You can see prices not maintaining anything above that, and could be continuing to reverse. So obviously going from the high to the low and then retracement. Or the other fib we could potentially do is something like this, where we get up to 61.8. Yep, so the 61.8, maybe the 71, you can just see potentially reverse from here and then continue this downside potential. And like I said, we're looking for smaller structures on them higher time frame moves in order to get our entries. So just below that 4 hour 50 MA as well. And on the 1 hour, just see we're breaking above that 1 hour 50 MA at the moment, but looks like we're retesting the previous higher low more than anything. So the next pair we've got on our watch list is Euro US dollar, of course, which is our main currency pair that we trade, because of course it's the most highly traded currency around. So on the monthly, you can just see that spinning top, price is testing that bottom of the wedge, but not really making any significant move yet. On the weekly, we have seen some more downside potential, but we've got a big rejection of this support here. So we can just see, of course, after sort of this up and down, really impulsive price action to either side, we have been a little bit more corrective lately, and maybe waiting for the DXY to show its hand. Okay, so on the daily, you can just see, of course, we had that wedge formation we broke out of, and then we're just looking for price to come down to this sort of minus 27%, which lines up nicely with the most recent low in liquidity area. So then we go on the 4 hour, we can just see how potentially we might be able to scale in. So we have this break of the 50 MA or inverted hammer that rejected that, and then we've made this impulse move to downside, made this new low, and now we're retracing to the 4 hour 50, 71/61.8%, and this could be his area of interest where we could look for downside momentum. And of course, we have these wicks here to offer liquidity, so we might be able to roll over from down here. So after making that lower low, now looking for that lower high and then moving down. So next one on our watch list is pound Aussie dollar. So of course this has been really impulsive so far this month, and the monthly could potentially close as a really big shooting star. So just got that liquidity there, the wedge that we've retested or tested, and now we're looking for that move to the downside. On the weekly, we've got another shooting star. So you can just see prices now come over. Now got to that minus 27%, and then we're looking for price to now probably retrace from here slightly, test this last major low, and then continue this downside potential to the 50 MA. And we're just looking for price to continue this downside momentum. So price failed to break the last major high as we saw here, and after this sort of collection of spinning tops, we of course anticipated that retracement, then retraced 38.2, where we've now continued to the minus 27%, which is now sitting in between the last major low and the next major low. So when we go into the daily, we can just see we had that smaller structure we spoke about last week, which was broken. So now we can just focus on this bigger structure, which you can see there's a lot of room to run, and potentially sort of a 2,000 or just under 2,000 pip trade potentially on the cards. So after forming these huge wicks up here, we then obviously reversed and broke below the daily 50 impulsively, now broke through this structure, and now we're looking at how we can scale into this trade. So when we go into the 4 hour, we can just see this sort of downside channel that we've got. Kind of looking for a price to maybe retrace slightly to the 4 hour 50, or just sort of roll over and break below this channel, break below this next major low, retrace to that, and then continues to the downside. As you can see here, just going from lower high to lower low, retrace to the 38.2. So now probably expecting our target to be at the minus 27%, which is in line with the next major low, and then we look for that retracement and then get in, completing that ABCD formation. But this one is very impulsive, so just trying to find that entry. And of course on the 1 hour we are really sort of below price. We've got this sort of impulse correction, then impulse. Next on our watch list is pound CAD. Something I don't really trade, but last week I looked at it and it's developing quite nicely. So on the monthly, just sort of stalling around that monthly 50 MA. But of course we had that spinning top, and now we've got sort of another one forming. Okay, so on the weekly, we can just see that we've got obviously this downtrend that was broken. However, we did not create a new high, so therefore we haven't invalidated the trend. We come to the 78.6 and liquidity area here, and then sort of started to roll over. We've not really seen any moves at the moment, but just looking for this downside momentum to carry on. So we've got this daily picture where we've got this sort of smaller trend line, and we've broken that, made this new low, breaking below the previous high low, and then retraced to the 71%. Well, we've now reversed from here, and now we're just looking for price to break through this daily 50 before continuing the downside potential. So when we go onto the 4 hour, we can just see we've now got another smaller trend line. We've broken through that, or through this wedge. Then we've retraced to the 50 EMA, retested that nicely before impulsively breaking down, and now we're just correcting again, sort of back towards that 4 hour 50, the 38.2, and now we can look for price to continue to the downside. You can see we've got these sort of higher lows down here, which gives us a lot of room to run if we can break through this support here at 1.71739. So just looking for price sort of reverse around this area, but like I said, we won't be rushing into any trades on Monday. So we have some liquidity here, and then we could potentially roll over from here, break through the support, and then there's major downside potential. And on the 1 hour, you can just see we are slightly above the 1 hour 50 MA, but spinning tops forms to potentially roll over, and obviously we are testing this liquidity area here. So next one on our watch list is GBP JPY, another one that I went through last week, but we're just waiting for the moves to develop. So we've obviously got that monthly evening star, which is now carrying that momentum, and then we had that wick formed. So on the weekly, you can just see really nice setup. So we've got this trend line that was broken, retested nicely, and then we've moved to the downside, made this new low, and then retraced to the golden pocket region. So between that 71 and 78.6, then we've retraced or reversed from here, and then we're looking for price to continue the downside potential. So below that weekly 50 MA as well. Okay, so on the daily, you can just see we've got this big impulse to the downside. We've then corrected towards this daily 50 MA. We sort of hovered around this 50%, slightly above it, and then we break back down below the shooting star, then a bearish engulfing, and now price is looking to sort of correct and then reverse back to the downside. So just nice impulse correction play, and of course the daily 50 MA, which you've seen on a number of the GBP CAD pairs. GBP pairs. So on the 4 hour, we can just see we've got this sort of wedge that occurred. So we had obviously 1 touch, 2 touch, 1 touch, 2 touch, 3 touch. Then we broke through this, which allowed for us to get our initial entries. Then, of course, we fulfilled that 90% rule, creating this support, now turned resistance. So we impulsively broke down. Then we started to correct again. You can see we've now made another wedge. So this is a case of price repeating itself. And if you've not watched the video before, go on to the rwftrading.com/smart-tips. So this is our smart tip series, and within this we have got I done a video on the true nature of the market. It's about how the market repeats itself, and here we can see price is just repeating itself by creating another sort of wedge, or sort of another channel, corrective channel, and then we've got this 1 touch, 2 touch at the top, 1 touch, 2 touch here. So we could see price come back up. I would like to see price push up to sort of the 4 hour 50 top of the channel, and also retest and sort of test this. But if we already had a retest, so we might not get that. We could also, after hovering here, we could just break it and then make another move to the downside after a slight retracement or retest, so then move to the downside. But this is just obviously that pattern play and trying to obviously create ourselves a good entry rather than rushing into any trades off of an impulsive move. So then on the 1 hour, you can just see 1 hour 50 MA is being rejected with this Greystone Doji. So then we could potentially reverse from here, break below that, and then continue our downside momentum. The next pair on our watch list is GBP USD, one that I keep mentioning every week because it's the same setup, but it's so important. So evening start, that monthly 50 MA, we broke through that support, and then the 61.8 reversal that we've got here. So on the weekly, you can see we're just retracing at 61.8. We've now sort of got this even star formation that was attempted, but of course the reason why we can't sort of count it as a strong even star is because the bearish engulfing was not bigger than the bullish engulfing or the same size. However, we can use this because it was towards Friday close. We could potentially see that this could continue this week, but you've just seen that weekly 50 MA and the trend line is here. Then on the daily, we can see potentially head and shoulders is forming. So the reason why I quite like this is because it gives us another touch of that 50 MA, gives us a touch of the trend line potentially, the 61.8, and this liquidity that we've got here. So if we get that right shoulder, we could get a nice entry, and then we can see price roll over to the downside for that big move that's potentially coming in the next few weeks. So we potentially could see this right shoulder within this area of interest, and then get that rollover. So on the 4 hour, we can just see we have got this counter trend line, so or this channel. So we've now broken below this. We've made this low, which is lower than the previous high low. Retracing the 38.2 and the 4 hour 50 EMA, and then we potentially roll over from here. However, if we get that right shoulder, it'd be nice because then we can see a nicer potential entry and then get in with a lot less drawdown. And on the 1 hour, you can just see we have got this channel form. So just like GJ, we've got this channel here. So we're looking for price just to bounce in between, and then potentially come up to one more touch before coming down to the downside, which was then obviously lead for the other GBP pairs to then follow. So the next pair we've got on our watch list is NZD USD. So another one we've been watching for the last couple of weeks. So you can see that monthly bearish pressure coming in. We've retraced that bearish candle there, but we're looking for price to further move to the downside. On the weekly, just simple impulse correction once again. So this impulse correction, looking to make a lower high, 50% fib, and then potentially roll over from here. So quite clean price action. On the daily, just see we've got this sort of long-term trend to the downside. Then we've got this counter trend line here. We've then broken that and then formed this evening star, which we then retraced but have not broken back above. So we're just looking for price to now continue from that momentum and continue to roll over to the downside. Going to the 4 hour. So going to the 4 hour, we can just see price made this, another trend line here, which is a bit clear on the 1 hour. When we broke through that, retraced to 61.8%, then started to move back to the downside below that 4 hour 50 MA. But on Friday, we just saw price creep back above. Be interested to see if we can now break further below. And on the 1 hour, you can see we have got another trend line here. So one touch, two touch, looking for price to sort of break through this, come down to this level of support, retrace to the 1 hour 50 MA, and then continue its move to the downside for that 90% rule to be achieved. And obviously that's an example how we can get a 1 hour entry by using sort of this correction, and then we could potentially use, rather than using our fib targets or our 90% rule as our target, we could then know that the longer term picture backs up this trade idea, and then we can get sort of a daily swing trade but with a 1 hour or even lower entry. So next player on our watch list is USD CAD. So USD CAD, of course, is an interesting one because of oil. We should see something similar happen. So obviously we've got this sort of double top in this area, but the current monthly candle is looking to close the spinning top, and obviously way above that monthly 50 MA. On the weekly, you can just see that gap that we haven't yet filled, but moving to the upside. Then we've last few weeks we just sort of consolidated, then we've got this big sort of spinning top, and then this week or last week created this inverted hammer. Then on the daily, we can just see prices just slowly starting to stall, and then we're starting to sort of have these lower highs, but sort of and slight lower lows. But this could just be correction and moving to the upside, which we'll see when we go on to the 4 hour. So we can just see here, price sitting above that daily 50 MA, and obviously it has been quite impulsive with this big impulse here. So we're looking for that to continue to the upside because, of course, if oil's going lower, then we expect the CAD to weaken and the USD CAD should push up to the upside. So after the oil news, just watching for some development, and obviously USD CAD does seem to be lagging behind, so it's not really completed or started that move that we'd think, because there could be a massive move to the upside to come if oil continues to be weak. But in the next few weeks, we could see that decrease in oil start to play out in USD CAD, and the USD CAD moves to the upside. So on the 4 hour, we have got a slightly different picture. So we obviously broke this down trend, broke this trend. Then we've come up, and then we've failed to make a new high. But of course we broke out and retraced and made sort of a next higher high, and then we've kind of made a slight higher low here or equaled it. But the other scenario that we could be looking at is a 4 hour head and shoulders. So left shoulder head, and then potentially come up to make a right shoulder, and then push it downside, which would go against the higher time frames. So that's just something to consider. But of course, if we can then break above and form a new high, then that obviously completes the sort of uptrend, and then we can look for that uptrend to continue in the next few months. Many technicals could be taken out of play if we do see more fundamentals come into play. So on the 1 hour, we can just see it is sort of currently sitting at 1 hour 50 MA, kind of looking to reverse, but we could see that play out quite nicely if we can get that nice head and shoulders, and of course that would send price to the downside, which would go with the sort of big extension we've got, and obviously this gap down here. Then finally on our watch list we've got USD Swiss franc. So USD Swiss franc we obviously know is very well correlated with gold. So what we can see here is that we're just sort of rejecting that monthly 50 MA at the moment. On the weekly, you can see we've got this channel here. So we've got this here. We then broke below, made this or equaled this low down here, come back up and retraced, touching this weekly 50 MA and reject. And then we're just looking for prices to roll over from here, maybe break below the channel, retest, and then come to the downside. So price did attempt to make a morning star, however, the bullish engulfing was not as big as the bearish engulfing, and therefore we can't count it. On the daily, you can just see this wedge formed. We broke out of this wedge, retraced to the 71%, and then of course we've got this big shooting star that happened on Friday's close. So this would suggest more downside potential from here. And then of course we want to break of that daily 50 MA and then push to the downside. On the 4 hour, you can just obviously see we've got this 4 hour. So going from this high and this low. This high and this low after we broke the trend. Look at that retracement, 88%. You can see inverted hammer perfectly on that, and then this push to the downside. So we're just looking for price to continue this downside momentum, and then break for that 450 MA before coming down to test these higher lows. So that is everything in our watch list. So I hope this has been helpful, guys, and I hope you're able to catch some pips off of it this week. I'll see you on the next one.